Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see some faces. I was thinking this morning how much I miss doing these presentations like face to face because I walk around the room and all that stuff. And so I'm probably gonna get a little antsy in my chair, but we'll see how I do. Um, and I actually have three presentations in a row. So I was like, I'm glad this one's first because this is the one I'm doing solely by myself. So the energy, the coffee is hidden. I had to pay my daughter 20 bucks to keep the dog quiet. Actually, that was my husband's idea, but we have a puppy. And so, in addition to two other dogs, and the puppy doesn't like the other, or the middle dog doesn't like the puppy. It's just a disaster. Anyways, really stupid idea. Let's talk about resilience and surviving. Anyway, so welcome everybody. I'm glad you guys all got up to listen to this, but basically what we're going to talk about today, and I'll pop up my presentation in a moment, but we're going to talk about resilience and basically how to survive and how to thrive. So I think I would say all of us, especially during COVID, have been surviving. At least I have barely been surviving. Clearly, I lost my conscience for a moment and bought a third dog, which was not a brilliant idea. So, um, yeah, it was supposed to be for my daughter's mental health, and in fact, it has officially ruined mine. But whatever, it's a trade-off. So as long as she's happy. But anyways, I think a lot of us, especially during COVID, were just surviving. Okay, and I think in the beginning it was kind of like cool, maybe not cool, but it was like maybe not cool to this group because we were really in survival mode, but it was like this thing that just was there, and we knew it was going to end soon. And here we are moving towards a year still in this situation. um, I would say that we've all just been surviving. I think at this point it's time to start thriving. And I don't want to make this conversation about COVID. I want it to be about your life in general. And so as we go through the presentation, I may ask some questions. You don't have to participate if you don't want to. It's really whatever you want to get out of it. But COVID is just this temporary thing on the calendar, which really sucks. But think of life before and after as well, okay? And so when you think about surviving and thriving, surviving would be an example would be like this morning the alarm goes off and you're like, oh, here we go, another day. And again, we're in the middle of a pandemic, so we are in that Groundhog's Day mode. But try to think afterwards or before that what your life looked like. What we want you to do is be able to get to that situation when the alarm goes off to actually get up with excitement and knowing that you have something to look forward to, whatever that may be, but looking at how can I thrive today? How can I thrive tomorrow? Okay. And so, what by the end of today's presentation, I really want you guys to look at, think of, hopefully, come out with some ideas of how to thrive every day. So, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so I can get to my presentation here. Okay, so I'm going to share this. I don't believe I can see the chat box when I'm in presentation mode. So if you do have anything to say or you want to interrupt me, go for it. So, all right, so for some of you that don't know me, I think I know most of you, but if you don't know me, I'm Amy Bidwell. I'm a professor in the Department of Health Promotion and Wellness. And I think I need to show something because I feel like I'm just looking and talking to myself. Okay, so I'm going to keep this on the side. So again, this is my first of three presentations today, so I'm glad this one's the first one so that we can get the caffeine through me quicker. Speaking of caffeine, I mentioned my dog, my puppy. She drank a whole cup of coffee yesterday. Like, do you know what that looked like for us all day? We were definitely on survival mode. I mean, we couldn't do, it was insane. Anyways, and how do I switch? There we go. Okay, so as I said, the objectives for today, we're going to start by defining resilience. Maybe I'll put you guys up here. Oh, there's a way to do it. Let's put you guys over here. Okay. So basically, we're going to define resilience in a moment. We're going to look at the 6 pillars of resilience. We're going to talk about positive psychology and goal setting, and then we're going to put it all together. And really, the 3 main things is 1, figuring out what it is that resilience is, and if you're a resilient person. 2, can you incorporate positivity into your daily life to help become more resilient? And then 3, can you set daily goals or daily habits? I like to call them daily habits that will help you be more resilient with a positive attitude. And all of that makes it so that you start to thrive instead of survive. And I like this little plant here. It's, it really shows how we're thriving. It's really thriving in the midst of cement. And I'm sure we've all experienced this, that piece of grass that pops up or that weed that pops up in the middle of our beautiful gardens. We don't like it, but they're thriving. And that's what you want to be, is you want to be that plant that can bust through the pavement or bust through those rocks that you've used for your garden. Okay. You want to be able to thrive. So basically that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's talk about resilience. And I'm obviously not one to put a bunch of texts on paper, but here we are. This is the American Psychological Association's definition of resilience. Process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress. So those stresses might be family, health, workplace, financial, so on and so forth. What do you got? I mean, do you think, and again, you guys can participate as much as you want, but does that definition mean anything to anybody? And I can only see so many of the faces. So if you shake your head, I'm not going to see much, but feel free again to pipe in if you wish. It's up to you. Anyone want to take a stab or a comment on this definition?
This is Sarah. I'll
Yes,
comment.
Sarah.
I'm wondering if it's really adapting. The word adapting sticks out to me.
Yeah, so that's a good word, adapting. So can we adapt to what has happened? And again, if we look back at, again, we'll just, for the sake of the elephant in the room, COVID, we'll keep using that as an example. I think in the beginning of COVID, we were all on survival mode, but then it's a matter of adapting. You have to adapt to your situation. You have to be able to adapt to what life has given you. And it's people that constantly try to fight that phenomenon that end up struggling and not surviving. Good. Anybody else want to take a stab at what they think of this definition? Is it good? Is it bad? Is there a part that resonates with you?
I would just note that this definition of resilience is kind of serious. And I think, I'm just saying, I think sometimes when you're trying to model or kind of pass on to our students resilience for things that maybe aren't quite as major, right? And
Right.
so, fights with roommates or feeling like no one likes you, or, like a string of things that just don't go your way, that someone with more maturity might be saying, I'm having a really bad day. But for some of our students, it's a really kind of fall apart moment as they're kind of transitioning to adulting and independence in college. So sometimes the resilience we teach our students isn't even, to the level of what we would call trauma or tragedy, I guess is what I'm saying. And so
Yeah.
I think that's a big challenge that's come about in teaching young adults.
I completely agree with that, Liz. And I teach a first year experience course, and it's all about kind of life skills and becoming a student. And we talk about resilience for like 2 or 3 weeks. And it is exactly what you said, Liz. It's, can I handle their tragedy? For one, they actually do come with more tragedy than I did when I was in school. Things are so much different. But the experiences that they're dealing with are much different than ours. And so it could be, it usually is roommate issues. Loneliness is one of the main reasons that people struggle in college. Financial issues we're seeing more and more in the college setting. Also for us, maybe in our personal lives, those might be some of those same things that we're dealing with right now, loneliness. Okay. We're in the middle of a pandemic. We can't go out to do what it is. Like, perfect example is today. I would love to be in front of you. Right. And so here I am getting dressed for this, and it's like, okay, I'm just going to talk to a screen. But when we're talking about our students, you're right. This definition probably doesn't resonate with them. Personally, I don't think it resonates with a lot of people because it is too serious. But essentially, what resilience is your ability to handle a situation, whatever that situation is at that time. So whether it be you're just experienced news of a major health issue, or your significant other just lost their job, or you're a college student and your roommate's a total what, or your roommate just left to go back home and now you're lonely, or you got I remember my resiliency experience when I was in college was that first time you get sick, like you've got that nasty cold and all you want is your mother. Like, I just remember that, like thinking, I just want my mother. And for looking back, it seems so superficial, but at the time that was important. And so when you think of resilience, don't think of this specific definition, think of what is resilience to you. And for me, it's the ability to handle what's been given to me, bounce back from it, which we're going to talk about in a moment, and then thereafter we're going to talk about, though there's another step after that. To be able to bounce back, there's another step after that. And so in our own lives and with our students, how can we get that individual to experience this resilience and still be able to thrive and not just survive? So not just going through the motions, but enjoying the motions. Oops. And so when we talk about bouncing back and resilience, a part of resilience is bouncing back. And this particular, you know, figure, I think really encompasses what bouncing back means, is that obviously bad times don't last forever. Other people you have to share these experiences with. So again, we're going to talk about in a moment that social network that you have. Unhelpful thinking only makes you feel worse. So sometimes perseverating over that situation might make things worse. Understanding that nobody is perfect. Okay. And I think if we think about COVID, again, I'll keep using that as an example, but I know as a mother of a 12-year-old, or she was 11 when COVID started, it was almost like this competition of who could do online schooling the best. But in reality, it's what works for you. And anything in life, it's what works for you. You have to get away in order to thrive in life. We really need to get away from comparisons. We need to get away from this concept of you need to be perfect, because nobody's perfect. And we can't compare ourselves to others, because the only thing that matters is really what's happening with you in your personal life, your professional life, whatever you're experiencing at that moment. We want to concentrate on good things, no matter how small. So we'll talk about that with goal setting and resilience at the end, is take those small accomplishments and think about those when you're trying to bounce back. Also experience this idea, or think about this idea that everybody does suffer. Everybody has setbacks. You probably have that person in mind where you're thinking, why does everything seem so perfect in their life? But you don't really know what's going on with their life. They're typically the ones that are probably on social media blasting all these perfect pictures of themselves, but in reality, their life isn't perfect. Okay. Everybody has something. As far as blaming fairly, you don't want to think, oh, it's my bad luck, or this really sucks, it happened to me. But that's not always true. Everybody you do things in life, everything that you do in life, it has a reason. So when you wake up in the morning, you have full control over what's going to happen that day. Not, if we're talking about our students, it's not their roommate that's going to control that person's life. It's not your significant other, your children. It's you. Okay. Accept what you can't change. I think this is what caused so much stress for everybody back in the midst of COVID, especially with our students, is we tried so hard to change it. we tried so hard to basically think this is going to end. What can we do to change it, to make it better? And our students, you know, especially in the spring semester, you know, they kind of just sat back and accepted it in a negative way, in a poor way, in a sense where they just kind of said, you know what, it is what it is. I'm going to just let my grades go because I have this excuse. Okay. Now we're in this situation where we know where, you know, we know where everybody stands. We know where our academics stand, our personal life, our professional life. We have to accept that we can't change COVID, right? We can't change the situation that we have right now. Pre-COVID, post-COVID, think of your life. You wake up in the morning, you have control over that particular day, but things that happen to you, you may not be able to control. So for instance, if you wake up and there's a massive snowstorm and you can't get to work, you can't change that. So I think we perseverate so much on the negative and the things that we can't change. If you have a negative colleague, you know, why put so much energy on trying to change that personality or that person, when in reality it's about you? How can you thrive that day and not worry about what's going on outside of you, right? Catastrophizing, making things worse. So I see this a lot with our students, and I'm sure you do, and in our personal lives. Something bad happens, and this is a maturity thing. Something bad happens, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's the end of the world, right? So my mom is like this. Like, if it snows out, it's the end of the world. Like, she hates snow, and she has to clean her car off or something, and it's like the end of the world. Or our students, you know, they get a bad grade or something. Oh my gosh, it's the end of the world. Well, you have like 10 other grades for that semester, so relax, okay? And then keep it in perspective. It's only that moment that might be negative. Again, it's how you bounce back and be more resilient after that. Oops. So as far as resilience, there's so much more to it than just bouncing back, okay? I think the key to resilience is, for one, understand, you know, trying to weather that storm, bouncing back from that storm, but then using that storm to grow. So again, if we go back to this figure, think of how many times, like I said, you see this leaf or this weed growing, you pull it out, and then where is it again a month later? It popped right back up. Okay? That's resilience. That's bouncing back. And what we want to do after we experience this downfall or this event, we want to bounce back, but then we want to use that event to help us grow. And so does somebody, I should say, want to share either experience with your students or experience in your own life where you experience something negative, you bounce back, but then you use that experience to help you grow and move forward? No one can think of anything or want to share maybe this early in the morning?
I will share. I didn't want to be the overshare, so I would giving others a chance. But 2008, 2009, I went through breast cancer treatment. So it was chemosurgery, radiation. You know, it started in the summer, but it went through that 2008, 2009 academic year. And so you get through the treatment, and what no one tells you is it's almost the worst part when you're done with treatment. Actually, they do warn you, and I ignored them. So that's, I would just say the social worker, you know, they make you out, you know, you kind of out process with the social worker who warns you that, you know, there's kind of this PTSD letdown. I'm like, okay, whatever. It's not going to happen to me. I didn't go into combat. I'm not going to get PTSD. So really I was surviving from March to June as the academic year kind of drew down in the reports. And in hindsight, I only realized realized how much I was barely making it. And then I kind of refreshed through the summer, but and then what happened is in the fall of 2009, I was asked to take part into a pretty big project for the institution. And I think I had a lot of excuses to say no, that I was kind of still recovering, but I went ahead and did it. And it basically kind of refocused the whole energy and things that consume your thoughts and, replaced it. And I think that was really kind of productive to not dwell on what had happened and worried about what the future holds, and instead refocus to the project. So I think refocusing to a project that I had a lot more control over
Key, key. Yeah,
was a huge benefit in hindsight. I don't know.
great.
I didn't do that deliberately. That was totally accidental. But
That's great. And I think it's right because you got in this situation with your health where you couldn't control it. And that's probably a little bit where that PTSD comes from. And then you were able to thrive by like you said, repurposing what your energy was going towards and develop or help work on this project. And that's a clear sign of resilience because you easily could have been in that situation where it's woe is me, I went through this situation, it sucked, I'm going to just ride it out for as long as I can and feel sorry for myself. But in reality, you did the opposite. And I feel like without knowing a ton about you, Liz, but at least professionally, you're certainly thriving. And so that has worked well. Thank you for sharing. Does anybody else want to share an experience where they easily could have just let it go and fall into this kind of, black hole of depression? And I know these can be kind of personal issues, so you certainly don't have to share. I know for me, I've at 44, I feel like I've gone through a lot, stuff that I certainly not there yet to share. But one of the things that I experienced right after I had my daughter, I was in the middle of my PhD and I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and I could barely move. I couldn't, I couldn't even hold my daughter. She was only 3 months old and I couldn't hold her and I couldn't snap her onesies, the little onesies. I couldn't snap the onesies. And I just went into this like deep state of depression. I had suffered from, postpartum depression to begin with, which they sense might have brought on the MS. But so I went through this period of kind of depression because I was diagnosed with this particular disease and I'm very, very active and I thought I was going to lose my activity and, my cognitive health and all of that. And so through that process, and we're going to talk about in a moment, the 6 pillars of resilience, but you really need to have an amazing support system near you and around you to help you overcome these. And so, of course, I did have an amazing support system. My husband was amazing, my parents, my family, and I got through it. But now the thing is again, I was able to bounce back, but that situation helped me grow as a person because now whenever things get hard, I think back to that time that, okay, I was able to get through that. And then a couple of years later, I sat by my father's bedside and held his hand while he passed away from lung cancer. And again, I use that as, and that actually happened 3 days after I defended my dissertation. So I don't even remember like actually getting my PhD, but I do remember how proud my father was at that moment. And I use all these situations to not only bounce back, but grow from that and improve your life from that. And so even with the example that Liz gave, it's taking these situations and not only being able to handle them and bounce back from them, but thriving is being able to use these experiences that we have in our life to make us a better person moving forward. So being able to handle what life gives us because we've had these experiences. And with our students, we see this with our students a lot, at first it was the helicopter parent, remember the helicopter parent. Then there was from what I was just told a couple years ago, the snowblower parent. I don't know if you've heard of the snowblower parent, but that's kind of where we are now, where it's that parent that's just pushing all the snow out of the way, or all the troubles out of the way of our child, so that they never experience any sort of negative feelings or distress. But how is that helping these students become resilient later in life? And I remember when I was in undergrad, I overslept for a physics exam, a physics quiz. It was a 10-point physics quiz. I overslept, and I have to say, I legitimately overslept. Like, I wasn't out drinking. Like, it was a Wednesday. I mean, it was just like a legitimate thing. And this is back in the 90s when we actually had alarm clocks, not cell phones. And so I just legitimately forgot to set my alarm. So whatever. Went to the professor afterwards, and I said, I'm so blah, blah, blah. Gave the line, the whole spiel, was truthful. And she said, no, you're not retaking it. So I'm like, okay, it's 10-point quiz, whatever. Screw you. That was my thought. Being 20 years old, I was like, whatever. Well, needless to say, I ended up failing the class by 1 point. And because I failed that class, I actually got kicked out of the program. This was for physical therapy, which meant I got kicked out of the school. And so this was 3 years into this program because I overslept and missed one quiz. I got kicked out of school. And I was like, are you really seriously kidding me right now? And I just remember thinking, there's a reason behind this. There's some sort of reason that this happened. So needless to say, I transferred to Brockport and, got my undergrad and so on and so forth. But I always reflected back with grad school with that, because when I was in grad school, it was like, you can't have an excuse. And I tell my students this all the time. I tell them that story. Like, that changed my whole life. That 10-point quiz completely changed the whole path. If it weren't for that, I'd be a physical therapist right now, probably miserable, because all my physical therapy friends are miserable. And I wouldn't be teaching. And that, if I wasn't able to bounce back from that and grow from that, I wouldn't be where I am today. And so that's what I tell my students is, it sucks that I just failed you. It does. And I know as a chair, I hear this more and more, like all the excuses. But I tell them, you know what? Instead of perseverating over the fact that you got this grade and you think it was unfair, you need to just accept it and figure out how you can move forward and grow. And I think the students really appreciate that, because they realize, like, I'm not going to take these excuses. It's okay. This has happened to you. How are you going to be this weed that's going to bust through the cement? Okay. So I have some at-home exercises I'm not going to share right now, but I will share this whole presentation with you. And there are some great links I put in here of activities I've done with my students that you can either share with your own students, but more importantly, do for yourself. Oops, I always do that. Okay. So the 6 pillars of resilience, I'm just going to go through these quickly, but basically when you're experiencing resilience, or when you want to be a resilient person, and again, this is something I share with my students, is you need to have a purpose. Okay. So you need to have some sort of purpose. If you're, like Liz used the example of that summer where she was sick and then was able to help out the school, you need to have a purpose behind what you want to achieve. So it's hard to bounce back and then grow if you don't have a purpose of what you want to achieve in the future. Okay. So to be a resilient person, you need to have goals. You need to have a purpose or a vision of what you want that perfect life to look like. And it's really hard to bounce back and grow if you don't know what that perfect life looks like. You also have to have composure. And, you see this in the workplace. You see it with our students all the time. It's that immediate response, that fight or flight response. And I think somebody had mentioned it. But it's that fight or flight response of, you just pissed me off. And so, or this situation just made me really mad. And so I'm going to just perseverate on it. And I'm going to be really pissy about it. And I'm going to blame it on everybody but myself. That is not resilience. Okay. It is a part of life. So there is no doubt, and I see a therapist myself regularly, and um, we just had an appointment yesterday, and we were talking about feeling like I'm having my first MS flare up in 12 years. I'm in the midst of it. I'm actually on my way to Strong Hospital tomorrow for some more work, more testing. But I was taking a walk with my husband the other day, and I was complaining about not being able to go for a run that day. And I don't know if anybody saw in the paper, the Syracuse paper or online paper, um, about this. I don't know the whole story, but my husband was telling me about this paraplegic. I think he was in the armed forces. I'm not sure. And he was telling me that story. And I'm like, you know what? I understand that I'm sitting here and I'm just complaining because I can't run today because my legs aren't working very well. But that's me. That's how I feel right now in this moment. And so having composure doesn't mean that you can't feel emotion. You can feel that feeling in that moment. When your students are mad about a grade or about their roommate, having some sort of whatever, I don't know what it is, all their issues, or they're lonely, whatever it is, you have a right to feel that. You have a right to feel it in that moment. Okay. But it's again, resilience is, are you able to then move from that? Okay. So I had my moment of feeling sorry for myself over something very superficial of not being able to run, but that was where I was at that moment. If I'm still at that moment 3 days later, then I'm not a resilient person. Okay. And so feel your emotion. You want to feel it, you want to allow it to be there. But then how do you handle it moving forward? And again, this is what I tell my students is it's okay to feel depressed or be lonely or be upset about a grade or be upset that your boyfriend broke up with you or whatever it is. But it's where you are weeks and months later. Are you still perseverating on it? If we use the example that Liz gave us, if she definitely needed to feel that in that moment of being diagnosed or going through treatment, but it's how you are 6 months later, a year later. Are you still in that same deep, dark hole? Okay. Are you not that that weed that's trying to bust through the cement? Okay. And think about when you pull that leaf out and that weed out, it takes some time for it to grow back. So it's not an immediate response. Okay. You obviously need to, again, have reasoning, being able to problem solve. So again, if you are in a situation where you're struggling, feeling that emotion, but then are you able to find ways to get out of it? Okay, so think about that for a second. Are you able to, in these times of trouble, find ways to overcome it? And it takes work to find ways to overcome it. It's not going to happen naturally. It's something you have to do yourself. Which brings us to our health. With nutrition, sleep, and exercise, so much of that gets altered when we're suffering, when we're just surviving. Think about when you're just surviving. And I'm sure you guys all know that the word stressed, spelled backwards, is desserts. And I know for me, I definitely go right to food when I'm stressed. And that happened to me, a couple weeks ago. I went through this binge where I was just eating crap for like 3 days. And I was like, woe is me. I really don't care. But I was able to problem solve and regulate my emotions and get through that. And now start to eat better and get more sleep and all that stuff. And then it's your tenacity. Again, talking about that persistence and that ability to bounce back. And I love this realistic optimism, is really understanding that there is good on the other side. Okay. And then collaboration. I'm sure all of you that experience some sort of stress or threat in your life, whatever that may be, you can't do it alone. You need somebody there for you, whoever it is. It could be your dog, it could be your neighbor, it could be whoever. But you need to have something there. Okay. All right. So I always do that. Okay. So what this brings us to is positive psychology. And I'm sure some of you guys have heard about positive psychology. And again, I do have an at-home exercise that you can do with this on your own. I do highly recommend, if you have time after this presentation, to go through these. Again, I'll send them to you. But it's really hard to be resilient and to thrive in life by being a negative person. And you know, all those people, the Debbie Downers, the negativity, you know, my daughter who's 12, she was just, I had asked her if she had spoken to one of her friends recently, and she's like, no, she's just always in a bad mood. She's so negative. She puts me in a bad mood. Okay. We've all been there. We have those people. I'm sure we have those people that we think of as those Debbie Downers, right? So positive psychology is not, oh, I'm happy today. Because you probably know that person too, that always seems happy and they're just annoying. They're like, oh, it's okay. That's not positive psychology. Okay. Positive psychology is essentially looking at the glass half full instead of half empty, right? It's saying, okay, this is what I've been given. This is my circumstance right now. How can I bounce back and grow, but also grow in a positive way? Okay, so when we think of positive psychology, Martin Seligman is kind of like the leading guru when it comes to positive psychology. And he created this PERMA model, and it talks about positive emotions. So how can we can create these positive emotions that become a part of our life? Okay, how can we, instead of you know, again, we'll use COVID as an example, instead of perseverating on the fact that, oh, it's another day, we wake up another day and we have to go through this Groundhog's Day. Or we wake up and it's like, okay, I'm one day closer to the end of this, right? We're one day closer to, you know, it being gone or whatever. Okay. So, you know, with the political unrest in the world, you know, that's a hot topic. It's one of those things where, okay, when you wake up, instead of perseverating over the news, which the news obviously is always negative, but it's one day closer to hopefully this changing. Okay. When you think of some sort of stress or threat that you've experienced in your own life, when you get up in the morning, how do you do that? Do you get up when your alarm goes off and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I need to get up and go to work and deal with these students that are driving me nuts? Or is it the alarm goes off and your first thought, well, your first thought still might be, oh my God, I can't believe I have to go to work. But your second thought should be, I am so grateful that I have a job, right? Think of all, and we're unique being in our positions. Most of us have job security for the most part, right? But think of those people that, you know, I brought my daughter to the mall the other day, randomly, not sure why, that was a disgrace, but all the stores that are out now at the mall that aren't there anymore at Destiny. And think of the people that lost their jobs. Okay. Think of all these restaurants that have gone out of business because of this. That's the true resilience. How are they going to handle that situation? Right. And so being grateful, as where we are right now, obviously everybody that's on this call has a job, or you probably wouldn't be here, but being grateful for what you have. That's what positive emotion is. Don't compare yourself with the individual that just bought themselves, you know, $500,000 house. Just appreciate what it is that you have. That's what matters. Okay. And then the next part of the PERMA is obviously relationships. Okay, well, it's actually goes to engagement and then relationships. But if we go to engagement, when we are focused on doing the things we truly enjoy and care about. So in order to be positive and experience positivity, do things you enjoy. If you don't like the class you're teaching, ask to teach a different class. If you don't like the people that you're with every day, change the people you're with, move your office, you know, take action, right? Okay. And be around people that you enjoy, which brings us to the relationship part. And then meaning, you need to have meaning behind what you're doing. How can you get up and go to work in the morning if you don't have some sort of purpose and meaning behind what you're doing. Okay. And accomplishments. This is really big. And this goes back to the bouncing back part. How can I bounce back if I've never experienced something good in my life? Okay. And so when you are struggling and when you're trying to be positive and you're trying to thrive and get through the day, think of what accomplishments you have had in the past. So for me, I think of my dissertation, my PhD, what I went through to get that and the struggles that I had during that time. If I can get through that, I accomplished that, I can get through anything. And I was having a discussion with a colleague this weekend, and she's in the midst of her comps, and she's like, that's it, I don't want to do it anymore. And I said, you know what? You need to do it for yourself, because someday you're going to use this and look back on it as your accomplishment. This is the thing that you did. So you want to find that accomplishment and make sure that you're using that as your bounce back tool. You bounce back, and now I'm going to grow because I know I've had success in the past. I was able to accomplish this in the past, so I sure the heck can handle this. That's thriving. Okay. So again, I have an at-home activity that you can do on that to just take you through the PERMA model, to have you lay out each aspect and if you actually have resources in each aspect. So the last part of thriving, so we've got resilience, which is really the first part, which is, am I resilient? Can I handle the stressors that life gives me? Can I bounce back from them and grow? Then can I grow in a positive way? Can I look at the glass half full instead of half empty? Can I appreciate the fact that I have a job instead of complaining about my colleagues that annoy me, right? The last thing is, how the heck do we do it? How we can't just, I can tell you, I can talk until my face is blue, but you guys can't change until you have the tools. And that's what, bothers me. And obviously, if we were face to face, I would have used the board and this and that. I wouldn't just be talking at you, but people give you this advice, but they don't give you the tools to get through it, right? So your tool is yourself. You have to set goals. And I love this quote, progress is not inevitable, it's up to us to create it. So here we might be surviving instead of thriving, but you now know that you can look at past experiences to try to get through this troubled time. You can use your relationships, you can use your resources and your positive energy to get over it. But now, what are you going to do tomorrow to help you? Okay. That's where the goal setting comes into play. And goal setting is not, I'm going to lose 10 pounds in the next 2 months. And we're in the middle of, January. That's always the hot thing. Or I'm going to improve my financial wellness. That's not a goal. That's a statement. That's not a goal. A goal needs to be something that's achievable and specific and measurable. So I'm sure you've seen this before. If not, I show it to my students all the time, but my research now really focuses on kind of this resilience and getting students to be able to handle life, handle college. And what we do in my first year class is we set goals. We set SMART goals every day or every week, and then we set habits every day. And we basically look at it as, okay, here's my overall weekly goal. So my weekly goal for a student might be to get my paper written, okay? But it might be get my paper written by Sunday at 5 p.m. for my English 101 class. That's a pretty smart goal. That's an achievable, realistic, timely, measurable goal, okay? But what happens to that student, or in your own sake, and I use the example here on the left about stress, I want to improve my stress, so I might go to bed earlier each day to get more sleep. But what habits are you creating each and every moment to get to that goal? Okay, so if it were our students that want to get this paper completed by Sunday, It's a great, smart, achievable goal, but what are their daily habits that are going to get them there? If we take the example of stress, if you're experiencing a lot of stress in your life, maybe you're not sleeping well. Well, you're going to start to get up every morning to meditate. Well, it's easy for me to say, I'm going to get up 15 minutes early tomorrow to meditate. But how does my day look leading up to that? What are these small habits that I have to create every single day or every single moment of my day to get to that morning where I can get up 15 minutes early? So a habit might be, if our goal is to reduce stress and start to meditate in the morning, or maybe work out in the morning, or whatever it is, we first need to think, okay, how can I get to bed earlier, right? So you have to backtrack. You always backtrack 24 hours. What is it that I'm going to do today to help it so I can get up tomorrow? I'm going to make sure when I go to bed, my clothes are laid out for meditation, which you don't really need to meditate in certain clothes, but let's say you're going to exercise. Lay your clothes out the night before. Get to bed earlier. Right now people always want to eat healthier. Well, if you don't plan your meals out ahead of time, these small little habits like going to the grocery store the day before or preparing your meal the night before so that you're not rushed the next day, nothing's going to happen. And I want to draw attention to an amazing book called Atomic Habits. It's by James Clear. I actually have my students read it in this new course that I'm teaching called Be Well Now and Beyond. It's basically a course based on resilience, positive psychology, and goal setting. But it's an amazing quick read. It's usually sitting here somewhere, but I actually listened to the audiobook when I used to drive to campus. But it's all about creating small habits every day that lead you to your overall goal. Okay. If you can't bring yourself to doing that, then you're not going to be able to reach that final goal. So in summary, I just skipped the last two slides. They were just about goal setting, but challenges are what make life interesting. Overcoming them is what makes life meaningful, right? And that really summarizes everything. Is we're going to have challenges in life. You can't avoid those. We can't have our students avoid them. We can't have our kids avoid them. Challenge is life, right? That's life. But what are you going to do to get yourself over that hump? And you're going to start by being more resilient. Then you're going to look at the glass half full instead of half empty. And then you're going to create these small habits every day that will help you be that stronger, more resilient, more positive person. If you have that colleague that just stresses you out, what small habits, first of all, what is your attitude when you get out of bed? And then what small habits are you going to create every day, to every moment of that day, to help you withstand that challenge of that individual that bothers you, right? So we're pretty much out of time. I did want to leave some time for discussion, but as usual, I get chit-chatting. But what are your thoughts? What are some comments that you might have that you want to share?
Thanks so much, Amy. That was very helpful. One thing that I appreciate about resilience is that the research indicates that it is something that you can build. People like to sometimes talk about it like it's a trait that you're born with, that there are resilient people and non-resilient people, but it's not a trait, it's a skill set, which means that if you're struggling with resilience, there are things that you can do that build it. So there aren't resilient and non-resilient people. There are opportunities to build and use your resilient strengths or not.
That is so true, Kristen. I know in the research about resilience, that's a real big take-home aspect, which is it's not something you're born with. It's something that you learn throughout life. And it's also not something that once you're at a certain age, you feel like you can't do anymore. Again, with these, just creating these small habits, and I did put in the chat box the name of the book, Atomic Habits, just creating these small little habits every day and looking at the glass half full instead of half empty, you'd be surprised what can happen. And what you could do, what helps a lot, is to have a gratitude journal or a gratitude statement every morning. So when you wake up, even before you get out of bed, if you can actually just sit there for a moment instead of jumping out of bed, sit there for a moment and set your intention for the day. It can be in your head or you can write it down, but it needs to be somewhere. Okay. And that helps you create your habits based off of that intention. Okay. Thank you, Kristen. What else? Any other questions or comments?
Hi, Amy. This is Kathy. I just have one comment about the whole gratitude thing. Many years ago, I had a close person who told me that I should write a gratitude list, 3 things, and I couldn't. So finally, she said to me, write an attitude list that I could. So I wrote down that attitude list. And when I got done, I realized that my attitude list was really what I was grateful for. I was angry with, I had a house to take care of that I couldn't afford, my kids, my job. And then when I looked at it, it was like, I was so grateful I had my children. I was so grateful that I had a roof over their head and that I had a job, right? So that helped me be able to shape that into, that from being, that filled with attitude, that Debbie Downer, to see that I really had a lot to be grateful for. So I always like to share that because sometimes I think being grateful can be overwhelming, right? What do I have to be grateful for?
That's great. Thank you for sharing. And that is so true. And I highly suggest, if you can write for 5 minutes at the start of your day, there's so much research to support writing for health and stress management, but you could do things like what Kathy mentioned. Okay. And it doesn't have to be negative, doesn't have to be positive. It's whatever you're feeling in that moment. Remember, you're allowed to feel your emotions in that moment. No one's taking that away from you. It's how the rest of your day or the rest of your week is going to go. Remember that. All right. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Sue.
I've been doing something like that for years. I actually keep, so this morning I wrote down one thing that was positive the day before, and I keep on little slips of paper and I call it my jar, my daily jar, just because that's what I call it. And on January 1st of every year, I read back through my year and I realize there's something good every single day. It might be that I'm still breathing on the bad days, if you want to call them bad days, but you realize that life is pretty good and there's a lot of positive things there. So if that helps anybody.
What a great idea. I love that. And it probably takes you 30 seconds, 15 seconds at most.
Yep. And I did it, so I kind of know it's kind of like a little journal in a way.
That is brilliant. And so anything that you can do to start your day off in a positive way to make you more resilient and thrive instead of survive. And I know John's here, so he's probably ready to cut us off because I know the next recording is going to start soon. But thank you all for coming. I will send out the PowerPoint so that you guys can have those links in there. And then I might also include a little evaluation just for my own sake of how the presentation went. Okay? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, John, I have to go off too, right?
Yeah, I'm going to have to end the session, and I'm hoping Rebecca will be here for the next one,
Sorry
but I
about
will
that.
stop in just to be sure.